Nigerian Senate has passed the Nigerian Insurance Industry Reform Act 2024, raising minimum capital requirements for insurers to 25 billion naira, non-life anyway, and 15 billion naira for life, and 35 billion naira for reinsurance. The legislation consolidates existing insurance laws, addresses currency depreciation, and introduces risk-based supervision, ensuring insurers can underwrite risks effectively. So this morning, again in our studios, I have Olufunmilola Adebowale, who is the head of research at Parthian Partners. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So let's look at the provisions of this Reform Act 2024 and what impacts you're hoping they would have.
Yes, so first of all, let's start with the fact that the essence of the bill is to ensure that there is a robust or a comprehensive legal framework that will guide the regulation of the Nigerian insurance industry. And like you mentioned, the minimum capital for the different segment of the insurance business was increased. And it is very crucial to understand that it is necessary at this point in time. Looking at the fact that the present administration is looking to achieve a $1 trillion economy. And for that to happen, the banking industry as well as the insurance industry, they play a pivotal role. So there's need for a robust insurance industry to be able to, guide and support the economy. And that is why we are saying this. So of the truth, it's going to have a positive impact on the sector. It has both positive and negative, but I believe the positive should outweigh the negative impact. We've seen in the last couple of years that the insurance sector in terms of performance has been doing well. Based on the reports that was released by the National Bureau of Statistics for Q3, we saw that the insurance sector grew by about 19.81% in Q3 from 13% in Q2. So that shows that the sector is doing well. However, if you look at the contribution to GDP, it is nothing to write home about. It's contributing less than 1% to GDP. So there's a need to ensure that this industry is robust now to contribute more to GDP and also drive that agenda. So it's going to have a positive impact in the sense that there will now be increased liquidity within the system, and that will also help to be able to finance huge projects and avoid capital flight. Most of these aviation and oil and gas projects or transactions are usually flown out of the country to foreign insurers, and that's increasing capital flight. So now that we'll have a robust insurance system, we see some of these transactions stay in Nigeria, and that's a good one. So there could be some sort of merger and acquisition, especially for the small players in the industry. But the big players are likely to meet up with these requirements. But the small players, we could see a form of merger and acquisition like we saw with the banking system in 2005, with the banking sector increasing, number of players in the industry increasing from like 89 to 25 banks. But in terms of the function and what they can do, their capacity, it actually increased. So we see the same thing play out in the insurance sector.
So is that part of the downsides that you talked about? Because you mentioned that there could be, that there are advantages and disadvantages.
Exactly.
So apart from that, are there other sides that we may need to consider? Because just as you said, the capacity for some small players to meet that threshold might not be there. So I'd like to understand if there are other sides that we need to be aware about.
Yeah, I think the major downside is the fact that there could be merger and acquisition, reducing the number of players in the industry. Though there are thoughts around the fact that there could be job losses because those ones that will be out of the market, they have employees, so they could return back to the labor market, exactly. So, but I feel the positive side will outweigh the negative side.
But then one would expect that if there are mergers and acquisitions, there could be some sort of absorptions of these people rather than have them being thrown into the markets.
Yes, that's true. But the capacity, what's the capacity? Can they actually absorb everybody? So that's a major question.
Okay, let's look at the legislation. How would you describe it in terms of what it is meant to achieve? Well, I understand that it is before the Senate, and of course there are deliberations ongoing around that. It has been passed already anyway. But in terms of penetration and the legislative side to it, how would you describe it?
Yeah, so in terms of penetration, what we are seeing currently is that the industry is actually being challenged because there's low penetration rate. I think Nigeria's insurance penetration rate is about 0.5%. When you compare it to South Africa, to US, they're above 10%. So we still have a long way to go. So I believe with this legislation, we are going to see a boost in and confidence in that sector. And if that happens, there will be increase in penetration. But there's still a lot of work to be done in the sense that there's need for sensitization. There's low awareness at the moment. So there's need for sensitization, telling people what value. It's not just pitching the fact that the size of the industry will increase, but what value will individuals get? That's actually very important because, consumers are battling with squeezed income. So if I'm going to spend my money on something, it has to give me value. So you have to pitch to me what value I'm going to get. So there's need for that sensitization to be able to widen let people understand what benefit it stands to get from that. So I think that's it.
Okay. Does this bill also, deal with issues around false claims? Because we've seen that debilitate a lot of insurance companies in some sorts, where some people want to circumvent the process for personal gains. Does this bill deal with that?
Yeah, it will actually do that. Because now they are adopting a risk-based approach, so it helps to predict risk, calculate risk. You can effectively manage it, and there will be systems in place to actually put checks and balances in place. And that NICOM is now on top of the game to ensure that insurance companies actually do not deny policyholders their claim. It's not denied and it's not delayed. So while that is in place, there will also be checks and balances to ensure that the claims are actually true. Because there are also Nigerians that might also want to, cut corners and, yeah. So there will be measures in place to actually make sure that that is being avoided.
Okay, so what's your projection for the future? Earlier on, you said that the contributions from the insurance sector is just about 1%. One would expect that with this new regulatory framework coming on board, it will boost that number. But then what are you projecting?
Yes, so like you mentioned, it's less than 1%. But because there will be more capital injection into the industry, they'll be able to take on bigger transactions. So that will help to drive the economy, to support the economy. Considering the fact that we are aiming at a 1 trillion economy, so the size of the economy will be large. So and then there will be bigger transactions. So they will be able to take on these transactions rather than leaving it out to foreign insurance to take the benefits. So and that will contribute to growth because it's within the Nigerian economy. So that's going to have a positive impact on economic growth.
Okay, so for those who are genuine, how do you think this new mechanism would actually ensure consumer protection?
Yeah, it will. And NICOM has been doing a great job in the last couple of years as regards it. If you remember, I think in November, the board of African Alliance Insurance were actually removed, and there was an interim management in place to handle. So that to show you to what extent the regulatory body will go to ensure that policy holders are actually protected. And they are serious. And with this move, it's a positive signal. It's showing us how determined they are. So I think the consumers will actually be protected with this regulatory body in place. So I don't think something we should be concerned about or should fear about.
I will be concerned about it because it's quite interesting that you have players in the industry, in the insurance sector, who might in some way get involved in unwholesome practices. So I'd like to find out from you, what are those practices that people should be educated about that players within that sector also carry out?
Yeah, so there are a number of them. There was something I read about brokers also trying to, cut corners within the industry. So the regulators are aware, and it's not something that might be achieved just maybe within 1 year. It will take a time.
Sorry to call, how do they try to cut corners? Because it's more or less like people bringing their funds, keep it for me in case I have issues either personally or for my business. I come to you able to assist me. So why would anyone who is in possession of these funds want to use it for other pecuniary gains?
So I think that's not the case. Most times, some of the transactions they bring in, so before the clients even remit the premiums, and probably there's a claim, there's a way, you are not remitting yet.
Okay.
And because you understand the system, there's a way you can game the system and you're getting claims for your clients, sort of. So there are a lot of bottlenecks between that, but the regulators are actually aware, like I mentioned, and there are steps, there are mechanisms in place. It will take time. Rome is not built in a day, but at least you've started taking the right step, and more will be done to ensure that things are in place. I think the industry will be sanitized, and we'll see a lot of positive developments in that industry. And because it's actually key, if we understand what benefits we can get from the insurance industry, there will be increased players, increased participants, yes, participation in that industry. So there'll be a lot of game-changing activities in the industry.
All right, so we have issues around currency depreciation, the market's not looking quite good, there are lots of encumbrances and challenges in Nigeria's business space or market environment. Earlier on, you said that South Africa and some other African countries are doing quite an appreciable number in terms of contribution to the GDP. How do you think this legislative position and this bill in particular will make the insurance sector in Nigeria competitive in Africa and globally?
Yeah, it will. The first thing is that, like I mentioned earlier, that for those big projects like aviation and oil and gas, if we're able to retain that within the country, because what value they're getting outside, they're getting it within the economy. So it increases the capacity of the Nigerian insurance sector, and it will help them to be more competitive. And the fact that there will be capital injection. So the sector is robust enough to be able to compete. We might not achieve that, 10% penetration rates at the moment, but with time, we'll get to that. So I believe with that capital injection and the other activities, we have a more robust insurance industry, which will not be able to only compete in Africa, but even globally. But it takes time, like I mentioned. It's not something that will be... yeah.
Everything takes time.
It takes time.
I understand. So what about the requirements for insurers when it comes to complying with these new requirements? Do you think it will be easy for them, to adjust?
It will. It will. For the major thing is having a strong institution. That's actually very key to know whether a player can, evade or not. So with NICOM in place and with what we have seen in the last couple of years, and with this, so I think the ability of to the extent to which the players will comply is actually really high, because you know what is at stake. In fact, even with what happened with African Alliance, it has already sent you a signal. If you misbehave, there's a sanction. And before you commit an offense, you look at the penalty. So is the penalty enough for you to commit that? If the penalty is higher than the offense, you tend not to. But if the penalty is lower than the offense, let me commit even anything, I'll still find my way around it. So with what is happening, with that deliberate act by NICOM, to ensure that the players in the industry actually comply with the new legislation.
Finally, before I let you go, you mentioned the oil and gas sector, the aviation sector as big players within this space. Are there other sectors that you feel could be a gold mine also for the insurance sector that could contribute?
Well, for now...
Maybe the real estate?
For real estate, well, it could in the long run, but currently, I think aviation and oil and gas are still the biggest players, and they'll still remain the biggest player in the short term.
Not even the mining industry too?
Well, the mining industry, we could see it in the medium, long term, but in the short term, it's something that has to do with huge capital. Yeah. So it will take time, but for now, at least we're sure of aviation, we're sure of oil and gas, but with time, in the long term, and as people are aware, they see how robust the system is and what they can do, okay, I have a claim, no matter how big the claim is, they can meet up with their obligations. So we have more players in the medium to long term.
All right, all right. Olufunmilola Adebowale, Head Research, Parthian Partners, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on the show. We appreciate that.